Hello and good morning. My name is Dorian Fougere. I'm a political ecologist currently working out of Berlin, Germany, and for many years before that worked in California and Indonesia. I'm speaking here today as a member of the leadership team for the IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management, or CEM. This pitches part of our mission and 6 priorities for the next quadrennium. I won't read our mission verbatim, but it focuses on developing ecosystem-based approaches to the management and sustainable use of natural and modified ecosystems. Our mandate includes 6 priorities: ecosystem risk assessment, including the red list of ecosystems; ecosystem restoration, which aligns with the United Nations Decade on Restoration; nature-based solutions and advancing the recently released global standard; ecosystem governance and developing principles for equity; cultural practices, which includes incorporating indigenous knowledge in the post-2020 biodiversity framework; and social ecological resilience and transformation, which is an overarching cross-cutting theme where we're trying to accelerate transformative change throughout CEM initiatives. My presentation will cover a bit of context, some keywords, and then go through 6 strategic recommendations for facilitating transformative change. So where are we? We're experiencing interlinked crises that are being amplified by climate change, and we're seeing an unprecedented pace at which entire ecosystems are being transformed on every continent. This means that the same landscapes we have known for generations now take on new structures and processes and shift their contributions to people. But transformation cuts both ways. It can overwhelm us and we lose things we value, or we can use it as an opportunity to intervene and rethink and restructure society. And again, there are examples of this from all around the world. For this reason, we're trying to answer, how do we accelerate beneficial transformations? So first, what do we mean by transformative conservation? Transformative conservation involves rethinking the relationship between nature, society, and individuals, and thereby trying to profoundly restructure systems at large scales, with the ultimate desired outcome of conserving biodiversity while justly transitioning to net negative emissions economies and securing the sustainable and regenerative use of natural resources. I've included at the bottom of this slide a link to the 2020 discussion paper we prepared on this topic, and we'll note that a journal paper is currently submitted and being revised. Briefly on the 6 strategic recommendations, these are not values, skills, tools, or process design principles. They are practical approaches taken from the experience of several CEM members. We're presenting them as a sequence, but they work together. And they're strategic insofar as we envisioned a desired future for the state of practice and are focused on bridging the gap between today's conditions and that vision. The first recommendation is to take a systems approach to transformation. We're starting from the premise that we live in complex adaptive systems. These have stocks, flows, feedbacks, they exhibit nonlinear behavior, they're dynamic, they have emergent properties, and they're self-organizing. This changes how we think about the causes and solutions to biodiversity loss and climate change, and our actual ability to engage and shape these dynamics. This means acknowledging the multiple influences on species survival, from land use through economics, cultural knowledge, gender, technology, institutions, and more. We're seeking to break and reorganize the feedback loops that perpetuate the exploitation of nature and people. Practically, this means taking advantage of existing systems concepts, a lot of which come from the literature on social ecological resilience. For example, take the adaptive cycle on the left-hand side of the slide. How do we foster movement from the crisis and release phase in the bottom right quadrant to the upper left quadrant of sense-making, renewal, and reorganization? On the right-hand side, see the panarchy diagram, which pushes us to think about how the adaptive cycle manifests across multiple scales and the upward and downward flows of information, people, and resources. So recommendation 1 is about using the systems concepts that are out there to help us manage complexity per the title of the presentation. Recommendation 2 is to partner with political movements to achieve equitable and just transformation. We argue that transformative conservation must invariably grapple with the power relations between people, and that science must inform an explicitly political and normative approach that helps us to move beyond nature-culture dichotomies, growth paradigms, and ever-expanding resource frontiers. This means that scientific and conservation organizations need to partner with youth, women, indigenous people, and disadvantaged groups. This kind of work involves not only legislative negotiations, but social movements for social change, whether those involve indigenous principles for a just transition, environmental justice movements that link pollution with health and race, or other mass mobilization like Extinction Rebellion or Fridays for the Future. So recommendation 2 is about creating new coalitions and mobilizing politically for change. Recommendation 3 is to link societal with personal or inner transformation. We recognize that a reciprocal relationship exists between individuals and societies, where our personal ethics, identity, values, and cultural practices all shape our institutions, our laws, and our markets. And reciprocally, we need our institutions to nurture and support individual growth and transformative learning. In places where people are separated from the land or view it just as a commodity, the starting point for this work is rethinking our relationships with nature. This can stem from religion, spirituality, contemporary ritual, or other sources. And this brings us to the systems concept of leverage points, which argues that where you intervene in a system matters in terms of your ability to change it. At the bottom of this diagram, you have mindsets or paradigms and the ability to transcend them. These provide the strongest leverage points for change because they guide the design of our economy and laws and institutions. So recommendation 3 is about working to reshape society by transforming ourselves at the same time. Recommendation 4 is to update our planning approaches to optimize things like enabling conditions, project designs, and methods. This lets us better anticipate and respond to nonlinear behavior, the emergence of unexpected phenomena, and uncertainty. Scenario planning is one popular approach, but there are also other approaches, including different types of assumption-based planning like you see here in this diagram. One example from here in Europe is dynamic adaptation policy pathways, which ask how inertia develops, what are the key power relations, what feedback loops are binding the system, and who has agency. It focuses on achieving a strategic vision rather than a linear outcome. And overall, it provides flexibility to accommodate experimentation, disturbances, mistakes, and learning. Another critical aspect is using indigenous, local, and scientific knowledge all together to build inclusive, equitable visions of the future. A good example is the Nature Futures framework of IPBES, which shifts from traditional forecasting of impacts on nature to nature-centered visions. This co-creative work incorporates multiple values, systems of knowledge, and scales in constructing biodiversity scenarios. So recommendation 4 is about changing how we frame and approach planning. Recommendation 5 is to shift from diagnosis and planning to transformative action. We recognize that assessments, policy, plans, and funding are fundamental prerequisites, but we also need to implement change projects and then to institutionalize these advances in law, policy, and governance agreements. A key aspect of this is facilitating exchange with and also mentoring from those people who are further along this path. The example in this image is of a transformation lab in Mexico that creates a safe space for this work. Another example is the Science for Climate Action Network in the United States, where they're focused not just on generating data and reports, but producing and applying solutions-oriented knowledge with diverse stakeholders. And all of this work under recommendation 5 requires not just technical knowledge, but a range of competencies: strategizing, facilitating and mediating, relationship building, and of course, systems thinking, and also inner competencies such as openness, self-awareness, compassion, and courage. So recommendation 5 is about facilitating exchange and learning to accelerate change in the ground. Finally, recommendation 6 is to improve the ability to adjust to transformation as it occurs. This is particularly important because actual observed climate changes frequently outpace modeled projections. And so we need flexibility and nimbleness. We partly get this through monitoring field conditions. For example, climate services and urban observatories provide data for day-to-day operations in real time to improve decision-making. We can also get nimbleness and flexibility from our institutions. Adaptive governance is the willingness and ability of our law and institutions to accommodate shifting environmental conditions while maintaining sufficient psychological, social, and economic stability and predictability. You see here on this slide some of the legal facets of this work. So recommendation 6 is about getting better at tracking and responding to the change process as it occurs. So to recap, transformative conservation is about restructuring systems for biodiversity conservation, stemming climate change, and social equity. The 6 recommendations involve a systems approach, partnering with the political. Don't forget inner transformation, and then how we plan, shift to action, and better adjust to transformation as it occurs. We hope that this has been valuable. This is one of our 2 CEM speaker pitches, along with a red list of ecosystems, and I encourage you to check that out as well. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.